is up, Oklahoma football fans, Oklahoma Sooners fans, college football fans, whoever you are? Welcome into Oklahoma Sooners Live. This is Oklahoma at the Voice of College Football, brought to you by the Voice of College Football Network. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Very excited to get into it. Finally into the offseason. Just get to talk offseason stuff for now until next, I don't know, next spring, really, get leading into the fall. Anyways, there's not a whole lot that we can really dive into when it comes to the world of football, but we are going to keep ourselves busy. That is for sure, because one thing that there is always to talk about in today's college football, it feels like it's constantly a revolving door when it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to recruiting, all of that fun stuff. So make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And of course, for those who want to support the channel just a little bit further, you can become a member today for as low as $2.99 a month. That's just a quick and easy way to help support the channel, help us keep on growing. We're giving you, for sure, content 3 times a week during the season and stuff. We give you guys content even more, and we're trying to pump that out even more frequently and building a community. So becoming a member today for as low as $2.99 a month. All you got to do is just click the link down in the description below, click join next to the channel, whatever, all that fun stuff. Anyways, one more quick thing just to keep the lights on as well. You can check out our merch shop. Oklahoma VOCFB merch is over at the Voice of College Football website. You just go to vocfb.com/shop. That link should be in the description below as well. There's a bunch of fun stuff on there. We're trying to find out new ways, fun ways to expand and keep on growing that merch shop as well to fit you as Sooners fans. So kind of stay tuned for that. It's the off season, so we get to work a little bit more on that kind of stuff behind the scenes. So huge shout out to the Voice of College Football Network, the team behind us, because they keep they keep everything rolling for us. But we're going to talk about the portal. We're going to talk about all of that, all the fun stuff, and so much more. Getting into some players that we're really looking forward to, really hoping for, and some of the players leaving too. I know a lot of it is kind of old news, but anyways, we'll dive right into it. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, follow us on social media, all that fun stuff. The Voice of College Football, so it's just at the VOCFB. If you want to follow the network, if you want to follow Oklahoma specific, it's at Oklahoma VOCFB. Let's dive into the transfer portal because it is officially portal season for Oklahoma. Yes, the portal officially opens in 3 days, I believe, 3 days. So January 2nd is when that's going to open up. It's going to run through January 16th when players are officially allowed to enter into the portal. So they've got that window that they can jump into. And it's going to be really interesting this year because I feel like Oklahoma should be able to retain a lot of the players that you would potentially worry about in years past. I feel like Oklahoma had a very good season to really hype up its program. I mean, this was really the dream season for the rebuild that you would need. It's not the dream season. Ooh, sorry, kicking the stand over there. But anyways, it's not the dream season when it comes to what you would hope for your program to be able to do. But it is the dream season in a rebuild because, I mean, the way that you would have anticipated it, the way that I called it here on the show, was that I would expect Oklahoma to win about 8 or 9 games, feel pretty good about where they're heading in the right direction. Give that to recruits, give that to transfer guys, give that to whoever it is that they're trying to get into the door, even guys that they're trying to keep around in the program. Give that 8 or 9 win season to them and say, now look where we're heading. Look what we can do. But to come away from this season where there was a lot of missing pieces, a lot of things could have gone right that were going wrong for Oklahoma, you can use this season as a beautiful example of, man, we're missing pieces and we still reached 10 wins. We're missing pieces and we still were able to make it to the college football playoff and host a college football playoff game. To be in the top half of the SEC, which is an accomplishment. I don't care what your argument is against that. That is an accomplishment, and so No, it's not. It's not the end goal. It's not what you wanted when it comes to being a fan. Obviously, you wanted to win that playoff game. You wanted to keep on moving on. You probably wanted to win, maybe at least one more of those games, specifically the Texas game. So it's not a dream season by any means. But when you're talking about a rebuild, I would say that that was definitely a dream season for Oklahoma in that regard, just because you're able to show recruits, the current players, the transfer portal players that, hey, we need you to fill in these plugs, and we're not that far off. Now, if you were sitting there at an 8 or 9 win season, you'd be saying, hey, we're not too far off from being in the talks. Right now, we're already in the talks. We're already there. So we just need to take that one step further to be able to get there and get through the window. We got to the window. We just couldn't fit through it because our rear end was a little too fat. But anyways, I would say big ones that we're losing from the transfer portal. We have kind of already covered this for the most part here on the channel, even on this show specifically. But Javonte Barnes, hate to see him leave a Sooner that I will always appreciate. I know he put in some really hard work for Oklahoma, even when he wasn't playing this season. Still put in some really hard work, and so I appreciate him and all the dedication that he put into the program. Kobe McKenzie, absolutely one of those guys. And Kobe McKenzie is the perfect example of how the transfer portal can be used properly for a player, where you stick it out in your system. You grow and learn in your system. And just by happenstance, because of all of the progression in the program around you and with the players that are coming in your spot around you, you just kind of get forced out of that starting role. And it's not that you're not a good enough player, because he still got a lot of that play time, but he didn't have all of that starting role play time, that key player play time. And it's hard to do that in a system like Brent Venables, where you have so many guys around you and so many guys stepping up with Owen Heineke and I'm trying to think of other guys that just stepped up. I think Omasigo is another guy that really stepped up a lot this year. Younger guys, and then of course you had Taylor Wine step up quite a bit. So you had a lot of players. You look at the defensive tackle and how deep that room is, and how you're probably going to lose a few more players that haven't announced it quite yet, but they will. So there's so many pieces, especially on that defense, that Kobe McKenzie is one of those guys that I can understand needing to go on, because you've given everything you can to this program, and you've given everything, all of your love, your blood, sweat, and tears to this program through the years, and it's time for you to build yourself up and build your own stock. And so he's one of those players I totally understand. I get it. You've got to move on. Caden Helms, another guy that I hate to see go, and I kind of get it for him. It seems like it's just not fit for him here. I don't know what it is. It just, there's certain guys that the injury bug just lingers on with you and keeps on hindering you and keeping you back in your career. Caden Helms is 100% one of those guys that I know the talent's there. It's just the injuries are holding him back. Similar to Jaden Gibson, and seeing what he had for him, man, like just the talent that's there, and you just can't get out there to show it. You can't get out there to prove it, because the injury bug just keeps on holding you back. And I hate that for guys like Caden Helms, Jaden Gibson, multiple offensive linemen going on, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because it's offensive linemen that were kind of in and out this season. You got Troy Everett, really didn't play most of the season. Jacob Sexton, Isaiah Autry-Dent, another depth guy that you would like to see, maybe guys like Isaiah Autry-Dent stick around, but knowing what Oklahoma is going after and knowing what they're trying to build there, and knowing that that's been a weak point, I'm okay with some turnover there. And especially knowing some of the young guys that are coming in, the young guys in the 26, 27 class that should be coming in here in the next few years. So you don't want to lose depth. You would like to keep guys around, obviously, but none of these names are really too shocking so far. I think Kobe McKenzie might have been the most shocking one, possibly on the top of my list. But it was also understandable. And then, you go through too. I feel like there was some others too that I didn't even put in my notes, but some others here recently that had popped up. But again, so far First of all, we haven't really seen any names pop up that are a shock, any names that seem like, wow, how did we let him go? And it seems like everybody so far just seems like it's the guys that you would have expected, the guys that even for guys that you hate to see leave, you would have expected it. I don't think any key names, the guys that you're like, man, the program's falling apart. We can't keep this guy around. So, like last year, I think we had a lot of names like that where we looked at him and we said, Nick Anderson, how are we letting that guy go? How are we letting Andrell Anthony go? And specifically in that wide receiver room, because it was just injured nonstop throughout the season. And, you look at the offensive line and the guys that we were letting go there. And it just felt like an exodus that was like, man, yeah, this is not a good look. Jackson Arnold being one of those guys, but I know a lot of people happy to see him leave. But anyways, it's not the same this year so far. Now, I will say there are going to be some bigger names that pop up, I believe, in the transfer portal when it opens between January 2nd. I would really say about January 2nd to January 10th is really when you're going to see the big names. After that, again, it's going to be guys that realize that they may not have a place here and may not have a role that they're looking for. And not to say that I'm okay with it, not to say that I like it, but that's what's going to happen. And then, of course, once you get to the springtime window, that's whenever you start to see portal exodus that is guys that were further down on the depth chart than they were hoping when you got to spring ball. And so then they're like, hey, I want playing time. And so they're going to be getting, heading out. So most departures right now, it seems like they're backups, injured players, really injured veterans for the most part, guys like Troy Everett. It doesn't really seem like the impact was totally unmanageable, which is a really good thing to take away from it. Not that I'm saying that I'm happy anyone's leaving, but it's stuff that it's not like we can't move on, that we can't find a way around it. And so that is a good thing. I think there's going to be some young guys hit the portal that will really hurt, but there's no production to say that it for sure was a detriment to this program, specifically on the defensive side, where some young guys that they don't have any production yet. So you can't really sit here and say, man, that sucks because they were going to be. That's what we're going to say for some of these guys. I think I don't want to say names because I didn't double check in some of the names to make sure that they have hit the portal already. But I know that there's a few guys that might be hitting the portal on the defensive side of the ball that I really don't want to see go because I have a lot of high hopes for them. And of course, we've seen some of those high hopes guys that have turned out to be just that. I will say that there is some retention going on, some guys that Oklahoma really wants to keep around. And I'll start off really with and today we're only going to be talking about the guys that could be leaving for the NFL draft right now. And that being John Mateer, being the first and foremost. It's really depending that decision on, I think January 14th is his end date when he can declare for the draft or not. And I think I saw by Mel Kiper, so I know, before and early on the season, about mid-season, Mel Kiper had him ranked somewhere around number 4, top 5, top 10 quarterback going into this draft class. And so I could see John Mateer trying to take advantage of this weak draft class. And I don't think that would be a bad idea for him. I do think that if he comes back, he could totally improve because of that thumb injury and everything that went on around that. It wasn't just the thumb, and we know that now. But I think with the thumb injury and then, of course, the decrease in production and what he was able to do there, I think John Mateer can come back stronger, healthier, with more experience in the SEC, with more poise, with more confidence going into the SEC and facing some of these tough defenses, some of these big-time programs, these big, tough players. It's a faster paced game when you're in the SEC compared to where he was playing at Washington State. So I think he sees that now and he recognizes that and he's able to grow around that. And when we saw what peak John Mateer could be whenever he played against Auburn, whenever he played against Michigan, what he could be, it's just you take some of those mistakes away with the interceptions. And that was a quarterback that you really hope to be able to bring back. And so I think if you were to look at John Mateer, and I would even say, man, first half John Mateer, let's say first half minus the last 10 minutes of the second quarter, whatever that was, whenever the complete implosion started to ensue. When you look at that game against Alabama, though, to start off against Alabama, John Mateer was looking really good. And so I think there's a case where John Mateer comes back and you really feel good about what he can do in year 2 at Oklahoma. But I can also understand him utilizing a weak draft class, a weak QB draft class, to kind of use that to his advantage. I think that would also be smart of him. So waiting his decision there. And then also wide receiver Isaiah Satania. I think Satania is one of those guys that when he came into Norman, nobody was really talking about him. It was kind of one of those guys that went on the back burner. It wasn't really talked about a whole lot. And I didn't even really talk too much about him because I just felt like, to me, it felt like an obvious one that he can make an impact. And I didn't expect him to make an impact the way that he did, leading the team with 965 yards on the season, 8 touchdowns, and just all the explosive plays, the special teams help that he was, the explosive special teams plays that he was able to provide for Oklahoma this past season in 2025. Isaiah Satania is absolutely one of those guys that I want to return. I want him to be back on the Sooners squad, and I'm not sure how hard they're really pushing for his retention. I know that they're pushing really hard for some portal guys. I know some younger guys are ready to step up in those roles where you're going to have possibly Satania, Deion Burks, the Gibson. I don't know for sure who all is going to be going on. We still don't know because we're going to be hitting transfer portal season. We're going to be hitting who's going to try to leave and try to make it in the draft. All of that's to come very soon. So January 14th is the NFL draft deadline, I do believe. So we're going to know more about guys like John Mateer and all that. Going on to Kip Lewis, I think he very well could be a high draft pick. I would love to see him come back for obvious reasons. I really think that he could up his draft stock if he were to have another really big year. But it also, you have to weigh your options. I think where he's at right now, he is at one of the team leaders in tackles. 76 tackles on the season, 10.5 tackles for loss. He could be a guy that's a top 150 draft pick. And his decision, I believe, is expected soon. But again, we're not going to know for sure until closer to time. And I would expect that he's probably out. He's probably gone, moving on. I don't expect him to come back. But there's a few other stars that Oklahoma's really trying to retain, trying to keep around. And we'll see. Again, this is kind of the sit here and wait period right now because a lot of players are announcing that they will be going to the portal, but they're not officially in the portal until January 2nd. So we'll see all after that. For Oklahoma, they've got some players that they're looking for in the transfer portal. And I'll start off with position groups. I think wide receiver being one of the obvious ones, and we'll get to a couple of guys that I believe could be really big targets for them in the transfer portal. There's some guys that are under the radar players that we could talk about, but I'm not going to get too far into that. I'm just going to get into the players that, man, if you were able to get your hands on that, then what could happen there? But wide receiver being a very obvious one. Offensive line depth is very important, and there's a lot of guys that we could talk about in offensive line depth. I think it's very vague right now. The names that are being thrown out there, it's going to be very vague overall. I think linebacker help is a very necessary one that is very necessary for Oklahoma. You don't know anything about Owen Heineke so far. He's trying to get that appeal. You don't know for sure if he's going to be able to make it back or not, so you would like to see him back, but if not, then you're really going to want some extra help, and you would want a veteran presence. I think if you go after guys and try to get an impact player the way that Kendall Daniels was able to be an impact player, then I believe that there's a lot of need for that in the linebacker group right now, and I think that if you can get that impact player, like I mentioned with Kendall Daniels and what he was able to be for Oklahoma, you could really have a solid pickup with somebody like that. And I'm not going to throw too many names because, again, a lot of this is speculation. A lot of the names that get put in pre-transfer portal could be withdrawing their names. Not super likely, but I'm going to get more into names whenever the portal is officially open. I just think it makes more sense. But we will talk about some names. Offensive line depth, I already brought that one up. Running back depth, I think you could look for a star 1-2 punch in case, one of your running backs doesn't work out, in case one of them leaves. I don't think that we're expecting Xavier Robinson or Torrey Blaylock to leave necessarily, or that they wouldn't be around, but you can always go for that depth. You know that you lost Javonte Barnes. I don't know what the future holds for Taylor Tatum, but, we've got question marks there. Jaden Knott's out. So you're losing running backs. You could at least use some depth pieces at running back. And speaking of running back, I know Caleb Hawkins was in from North Texas. That's a hometown prospect. He was a true freshman All-American. He's from Shawnee, Oklahoma. So that's about, 45 minutes north of Norman, I believe. So anyways, he's one of the top running backs in the portal currently, or expected to be in the portal. So I know that that's one guy that I could see kind of Oklahoma trying to push for, being an Oklahoma guy, getting him in the door. Of course, Oklahoma State's going to be another program that's going to try for an Oklahoma kid. And then, of course, you got Texas is probably going to be looking for some running back depth. I would assume maybe even LSU, because they're losing some guys over there. But I think Oklahoma really could use that running back depth, at the very least depth. If not, get some guys that can help get in there and have that 1-2 with a third guy in there for a punch. So that's definitely a necessary look for Oklahoma. But anyways, yeah, Caleb Hawkins was one of them that I saw pop up. Didn't really look too far into him, but I do know that that's a guy that really could be on Oklahoma's radar. And for wide receiver, I know Jace Brown was mentioned by some from Kansas State. That's a guy that Oklahoma could be looking into, but I know that there is one name that stands out that I know Oklahoma players would love to get on their roster and would love to have come over to Norman, and that's Cam Coleman from Auburn. Cam Coleman is an absolute animal. He's going to give you production. I don't care who is at quarterback. All you have to do is throw it up to him, and the dude is an alien. He's going to find ways to bring that ball in. You saw the way that he was able to roast Oklahoma really 2 years in a row when he gets the ball, but this past year it just felt like it was the Cam Coleman show, and if they would have kept on giving him the ball, Auburn really could have won that game. But anyways, yeah, just looking at Cam Coleman, 6'3", he's a sophomore, so he's got a few years left. In his 2 seasons, I believe 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns. Just one of the top guys in the portal. He is going to be wide receiver number 1 in the portal, and a lot of teams are going to be reaching out. I'm sure Ohio State would probably reach out. That comes to mind. I didn't see anything on Ohio State, but I'm sure they would reach out. USC was a name that I saw, a team that I saw pushing for Cam Coleman. I don't know how much leverage they would have, but I know that the big ones that Oklahoma would have to fight for would be Texas and Texas A&M. Both teams have really high really big abilities in NIL to be able to push there, but both teams really need that wide receiver, and a guy like Cam Coleman. Both have a big brand to be able to fight and to kind of push around Oklahoma a little bit, and so Oklahoma is going to be in the mix for Cam Coleman. And from what I'm seeing, from what I understand, Oklahoma is willing and expecting to offer Cam Coleman an NIL package that is more than any player that has been at Oklahoma. He's going to get it feels like a blank checkbook and say, what do we have to do to get you in the door? And it's not to say that Oklahoma's the place to go, that's where Cam Coleman's going to end up, because it is not always about money. That is a big factor in today with the NIL, but it is not always about money the way that a lot of people mistake it to be, because it still comes down to where am I going to go after Oklahoma? And I think guys like Cam Coleman are very interested in am I going to make it to the NFL? And if I make it to the NFL, how successful am I going to be able to transition to the NFL? So I think that you have to look at a guy like Cam Coleman and expect him to be looking for that in a place as well. So it's not going to all be NIL. And not only that, but also just because Oklahoma is willing to write a very hefty check does not mean that other teams won't also try to match that. And Texas A&M are both teams that would be willing and probably able to at least, but possibly willing to write that same check to Cam Coleman to say, hey, slow down just a minute. What do you think about coming over here instead? And looking at the teams that they have around them too, those are two teams, again, very competitive. Texas A&M, top of the SEC. They were able to make it to the college football playoffs with a home berth. And then, of course, Texas not too far behind. And they have we've beat Oklahoma, in their back pocket. And so that Red River rivalry is definitely something that both sides are going to try to use to their advantage. But again, both Texas teams, Texas and Texas A&M, do have deep pockets. So just understanding that Cam Coleman is going to be a very hard one, but that is the dream target. That is wide receiver number one for a lot of teams, but I know Oklahoma is putting that as not just wide receiver one, but player number one in all of the portal. That is the guy that they are going after, and they're willing to put out some big money. There's some other guys too that, like I said, we'll name off more names. Some guys that I believe Oklahoma is really going to push for. I'm going to try to do more digging as well to really know where Oklahoma sits on some of that as well. But I don't want to throw out too many names until we get to where the portal is officially open, because I think it's silly right now the way that players are even able to throw their names into the portal, because you're not officially into the portal until the 2nd. And so it's all just kind of silly. I can understand so-and-so is expected to be in the portal, but it's not really official until that portal window is officially open for the 2nd through the 2nd through the 16th, right? I know I had that in my notes. 2nd through the 16th, and the 14th is NFL draft deadline. So, anyways, for now, that is all that we've got. I'll jump over to the chat real quick. I see you guys in the chat. Bishop is in the chat. He says, "Big salute, Sooners faith, work, family." Big salute back to you, Bishop. Appreciate you for jumping in the chat, watching tonight. Stacy says, "I know Heineke may not be allowed to come back, but I wish he would be. He was a breakout star." Absolutely. I mean, that's the guy that we want to see come back. I mean, I really hope that appeal comes through, and I'm sure, we're not the only ones. I know all of Oklahoma wants to see him come back. It's going to be tough. I feel like they're not going to, and it's going to irritate me that guys like him wouldn't get his appeal, but a guy like, I'll just say it, a guy like Diego Pavia would. So, I mean, Heineke is a standout kid, deserves another year for sure. Stacy also says, "If I'm not mistaken, Burke declared NFL intentions. I have a feeling Kip Lewis might come back. Like T, the longer it goes, I have more hope Kip returns." And I think Oklahoma's pushing for Kip too. I think the coaches are really pushing, hey, we feel that you keep on progressing. You keep on showing that you're NFL talent, but we feel like one more year could really be beneficial to you. And I think that's what they're trying there in the back, in the background, and trying to keep Kip around. I have high hopes. I really hope that Kip comes back, and especially with all the guys that are leaving and all the guys that won't be there, Kip Lewis is one of those guys that you would really hope you could keep him around. And so I've got high hopes, and I think I agree with you. The longer it drags on, I really hope that he does come back. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to get him to stay, because it's every player's dream to make it to the NFL. You don't go to college football and just not want to make it to the NFL. I feel like every player wants to make it. That's why they go play college football. Even if you're playing a D2, D3 level, you still have that dream. Like, hey, let's see how far I could take this. You may not have the expectation, but you would have the dream. So it's going to be hard to keep him out. Chuck says it's about QB play, money, offense in the past. That puts us out. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, Chuck. I don't really have high expectations to get Cam Coleman, but I do agree with you. I think QB play, you kind of lean towards Texas or Texas A&M currently, the way that it sits. You can look at John Mateer, and I think John Mateer could be a talking point where you get John Mateer in the room with Cam Coleman, and I think he's going to be able to relate really well with Cam, and I think that relationship could build. But yeah, I agree with you. I think QB play, it's kind of leans towards it, and it definitely does go based off of money. And then, of course, the offensive play. But I think part of that offensive play you can kind of pitch towards players like that is we weren't that far off and we could use you. And that's definitely something for Oklahoma to kind of keep in their back pocket. But anyways, I'm not saying that Cam Coleman's coming. I don't really have high expectations that he would go to Oklahoma, that he would transfer into Oklahoma. I really don't think that's where he's going to end up. I think Texas A&M are the two teams that really seem like they're the front runners. But Oklahoma is going to be pushing hard. You best believe that if there is anything, there's no Broklahoma when it comes to what they're willing to dish out to Cam Coleman. I don't know what the numbers are, but I just know that it is higher than what anyone else has ever gotten for coming to Oklahoma. So that Broklahoma term is definitely not one that would be able to be used in that circumstance. All right, let's look at offensive concerns. 88th ranked overall offense, about a 354.3 yards per game. Overall, you really look at what the offensive, how do I say this? Offensive schemes, the overall offensive game plan felt like it was in a much better place this year, and it's not saying much. I think if you break down the offense, and that's something that we could probably do for members, that's something that we're not really allowed to do too much, but we could really break down what this offense is all about and dive into it. And when you really break it down, this offense really has a lot of possibilities of what it could be. And we saw glimpses of that if it could find more of those explosive plays. But ultimately, what this offense lacks is those medium gains. It has the short gains. It has the explosive plays. It doesn't really have those medium gains, those slants across the middle. And the slants across the middle ended up turning out for larger gains, but you don't have those like 8 to 12 yard gains very often. And I'd say maybe not even 8. Let's go like 6 to 12 yard gains. And I feel like that's what Oklahoma really lacked overall in the offense. Of course, with Jaden Ott being one of those portal busts and one of those guys that you really would have hoped to have performed for Oklahoma, that would really sucked, and that kind of held back what that running back room was supposed to look like this season, what Oklahoma fans were expecting from Oklahoma. So, that was definitely something. He had 21 carries for 68 yards, despite a hefty chunk of money going into that NIL. And again, this is where the portal and NIL era really comes into play, where, man, it sucks to have these types of things going on, because you spend, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars for no production. For a guy like Jaden Ott, did not give any production. There was the Kent State game where I really felt like, hey, you're starting to see what they like in Jaden Ott, and then just nothing after that, nothing really before that. So that was very disappointing. And I think the run game overall is something that I don't really think needs to really improve itself, but that run game and intermediate passing game, that the run game specifically, I think just needs to be opened up more. I think it just needs to be given a chance to open up and find some sort of rhythm. We talked about that all season. So on the offense, that's really where I think the biggest concern going into the offseason, understanding that we've got to get that run game into rhythm. We've got to make sure that the offensive line is built for that it's ready for it, that it's able to pass, or that it's able to run block, and then being able to try to look for guys in the portal that would then be able to help open up that run game and get that run game, again, getting it into a rhythm. I don't even think the run game was really all that bad. Again, we break it down every week, especially in the losses. It just felt like the Ole Miss one specifically, I felt like that was a loss that if Oklahoma just keeps on leaning on the run game, there's no doubt in my mind that Oklahoma wins that game if they lean on the run game, because that was what got Oklahoma back into the game. That's what gave Oklahoma a chance, was Xavier Robinson, and you just completely abandoned it. And so it's not that I think the run game needs to necessarily improve at all. I just think it needs to be given a chance. And that comes down to Ben Arbuckle. So I think in his first year, that was my biggest criticism. And then, of course, after that, I think just the intermediate passing game. Finding that in 2026 will be very crucial for Oklahoma. The defensive success, you don't get in much better. The top 10 defense easily, possibly even top 5, top 3 defense. I would be willing to say top 3 defense when you just look at it. More than just the stats, you look at the eye test as well. Oklahoma has a top 3 defense and is able to shut down nearly any offense. And it really proved to be that. It had its weaknesses at points that at points in the season. I think you look at what Alabama did to the defense, kind of breaking it down there in the bowl game, and then of course, in the playoff game, and then of course, I think you look at what Ole Miss did, and they were able to kind of exploit some things there. And I think the biggest one was just that hurry up offense, but waiting. It was the hurry up offense, line up, but wait until after the communication is cut off in the headset, and then line up. That really threw Oklahoma off a lot. And so that was one that I thought was pretty interesting from Ole Miss's standpoint, was them being able to kind of utilize that to their advantage. And I thought that was really interesting. And that was probably the biggest success against Oklahoma. I think Ole Miss was probably the most successful against Oklahoma. And again, a lot of that came down to just very strategic timing. The pre-snap motions and all of that really fed into it against Ole Miss. But ultimately, you take out that Ole Miss game, you take out the small weaknesses. Overall, this was a very elite, very dominant defense that found its rhythm and just found what this defense can truly be. 41 sacks, tied for the national lead, 115 tackles for a loss. Again, another tie for first in the nation. And just a really great defense. I mean, elite defense. This is what we can expect in 2026. I think you would expect about the same defense. I don't know if I would expect as good of a defense, but I do think that, I do think that you look at it, and this was a defense that, leaning forward and looking at where they're going with it, you would expect it to be about the same. Again, it's going to be hard to beat this defense. And at times, too, again, this is where I say that it comes down to the eye test, because at times the statistics are going to show that, oh, man, Alabama put up this many yards, Tennessee put up this many yards, Ole Miss put up this many yards, which Ole Miss is a bad example, because I think Ole Miss did do well against Oklahoma's defense, as I mentioned a moment ago. But ultimately, when you look at what this defense is and you actually pay attention to what the defense is doing, they very much play that complementary football this year. It felt that way, where the defense was really setting the offense up and helping and ultimately winning games. And so it was very much a bend but don't break type of defense against teams like Alabama, teams like Tennessee, rather than just being a suffocating defense that you can't get anything past them. They were very much, you cannot run on us, so we're going to make you one-dimensional. And sometimes when you're one-dimensional, you're going to find those explosive plays, because that's about all you can hit on them. So elite defense, don't expect much more, but it's going to be another great defense, hopefully, going forward into 2026. We're going to look at the 2026 schedule real quick as well. Before we do, I see Chuck says, he says, Tennessee and Illinois game lets you see how important it is to be able to run the ball. If we do not get run games, we're not going to be able to get in shape again. And you also kind of throw this up, Chuck. He says, if we only average 3.4 yards a run, our run game is terrible. Again, like I said, it's more than just the stats, that one specifically, because there are so many times when you get that small run to open up a bigger run, and then you don't go with what's open. I agree with you. Statistically, the run game was not good. It needs to improve, no doubt. But I think more than just improving the run game itself is just improving on opening it up and allowing that run game to get its rhythm. When you don't ever get into any sort of rhythm, you're not ever going to have a good run game. That's the same with the passing game. You can't expect your quarterback to put up 300 yards when he's only passing it 12 times a game. Similar with the run game, that it's not all about averages. It's about what you're setting up and how you follow up with that setup. And I think Ben Arbuckle, his system allows that, but he just didn't follow it up a lot of times. And I think that Ole Miss game was a perfect example where you should have followed up with it. You should have kept it going. I'm trying to think. There was another game too, and I can't think of which game it was where I felt very strongly that the run game looks terrible on paper, and the averages are terrible because you have all of these setup runs, but nothing to break it free. Nothing to you have the runs set up so sporadically where you have one run to 3 passes. That ratio is not going to help, and so you've really got to balance it out more. Anyways, let's look at the 2026 schedule for Oklahoma real quick, just because I think it's interesting when you look at the schedule and see where Oklahoma's at. At home, UTEP, good one there. At Michigan, that one will be interesting. I'm really interested to see how Kenny Dillingham ends up kind of shaping things out there. I feel like that's got to be Oklahoma favored right now, regardless of being at the Big House. I really think that's what it is. But right now, it feels Oklahoma should have that game. They beat them this year, and now you're kind of tearing that program apart, really, was what it feels like. Anyways, then back at home against New Mexico, at Georgia, at Texas, very tough stretch there, but I believe, there's a bye week in between. So you get a bye week before Texas. Man, if you don't win against Texas next year, man, there's going to be a very strong narrative. But this is where it really becomes much easier for Oklahoma, where Oklahoma gets a very favorable schedule. So you've got those 2 games really at Georgia and then against Texas. Outside of those 2, I feel like Oklahoma should have a very good chance against every game, I would say, versus Kentucky. So at home, at Mississippi State, South Carolina at home, at Florida, Ole Miss at home, Texas A&M at home. That is a tough game, but it's at home, which gives you some favorability there, if that's even a word. And then you've got at Missouri. That's a very favorable schedule right now when we're looking at it pre-portal, spring ball, pre-everything. We're looking at it, pre-off-season, really. This feels like next season is 10-2. 10-2 or bust. Because I think that you've got 3 games that are coin flips right now. I think at Georgia currently I would say is a loss. But then you've got a coin flip between Texas and Texas A&M. Right now, when we're looking at the schedule, 10-2 is absolutely a must, and 10-2 should get you into the playoffs. I don't know why it wouldn't, but I would hope that if we're looking at it right now and thinking 10-2, obviously there's going to be a team in there that's probably better than what we would expect. Maybe there's a team like Texas A&M that's worse than what we expected. The way that I think South Carolina is one of those teams this year that I thought South Carolina would have been much better than what they turned out to be. Ole Miss is another team that I think they were way better than I expected them to be early on in the season. So there's some teams like that I think could surprise you, kind of shock you, be better than what you would expect, especially right now when we're not even sure what the roster is going to look like next season. But 10-2 is 100% on the table, I think, right now for Oklahoma looking forward, especially if Oklahoma can kind of keep themselves where they're at. Now, I don't know why Oklahoma wouldn't expect to be just as good next year. I'm looking at it, again, pre-everything. This is pre-off season. But I believe that Oklahoma should expect to be just as good next year. I think just saying just as good, expecting to be just as good next year. And you could hope that you could add some portal pieces to make the offense better. And so making that offense better, I think, turns this entire team better, because I don't think the defense will digress. I think they'll be about the same, maybe slightly worse statistically, but I think the defense overall will be very similar to what we saw this year, and I think it's going to keep on being the same way. But that's a schedule that I think is extremely favorable for Oklahoma to go 10-2 and hope for 11-1. So we'll see. Again, this is way early talk, way early talk. But again, I think Texas and Texas A&M being your coin flips, and then you've got at Georgia being the one that I think I would call an early loss. Outside of that, and who knows, maybe you go and upset Georgia. Not that I'm going to put any money on it or anything, but and then of course you've got other teams that maybe South Carolina's better than what we expected, and maybe Florida is better than what we expect them to be. Maybe Ole Miss turns out to be just as good, that they don't take a step back. So there's some teams that could definitely turn out to be better than what you thought they were going to be. Nonetheless, very favorable, manageable schedule where 10-2 is extremely realistic. And again, if things go in the offseason the way that we would hope them to go, Oklahoma could go into next season hopeful for an 11-1 season. Talking about a top team in the nation leading into next season, where it was totally different this year, where we were hopeful for that 10-win season, hopeful for a 9-win season, but it was really just felt unrealistic. And then, of course, here we are. Chuck, going back to Chuck real quick, he says, well, that is the game plan, or sorry, that's the play calling. The OC doesn't want to run, they can't, so it does become about averages. I get what you're saying, but what I'm trying to say is, again, not just the offensive coordinator, because, again, we've kind of broken this down in the past, but I think some of that falls into where your running backs coach really needs to help in that run game planning, where I feel like that's where we're missing, is that run play calling. And of course, Ben Arbuckle's the one with the system. Ben Arbuckle's the one calling the plays in, but it doesn't always come down to offensive, but it is play calling. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think, I think when you look at averages, the averages are falling down upon, they're lower because of what the play calling was. I think the play calling can improve. If you were to take an overview of this past year, if I can see it, I know Ben Arbuckle can see it. I know that DeMarco Murray can see it. I know that Brent Venables can see it. Whoever else, I know that they're far smarter than I am. So if I can see it, I feel like they should be able to see that and work on that going into next season. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we're on the same page there. Just talking about it from a different point of view, maybe from the other side. But anyways, that's all we got for tonight. There will be no show on Thursday. Happy New Year to everybody. So everybody enjoy your New Year's. Everybody enjoy jumping into it. Hopefully you guys have some fun traditions for your New Year's celebrations. I know we'll be watching, going to a hockey game, kind of having fun there with the family. And then, of course, probably just party into the new year. Why not? That's the way to do it. That's the way to go about it. Hopefully everybody has a great 2026 or a great rest of your 2025 leading into 2026. Let's get a fun start onto 2026. Appreciate everybody so much for jumping in, for tuning in. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Of course, you can become a member for as low as $2.99 by clicking join down below. That is the best way to help support us here on the channel. And keep on growing and trying to help with the algorithms, building the community, all that fun stuff. But anyways, we appreciate everybody so much for tuning in. Have a happy new year. We'll catch you next time.